Port Colborne, Ontario resident Ian Thomson used a gun to defend himself against arsonists who were firebombing his home. But when the police arrived, it was Thomson who was charged with various weapons offenses. Here now to tell us why he thinks this case highlights the need for changes to Canada's gun laws is Thomson's defense lawyer. There's Ed Burlew. Good to have you here at TVO.
Thank you for having me on today.
Let's go back and talk about this incident just to bring everybody up to scratch. The incident in question happened when?
It happened the 26th of August. It was a Sunday morning. It was 7:30 in the morning. Mr. Thomson was asleep in his bed and he heard a loud thump. He looked out because he found that what the loud thump was, the bang, were Molotov cocktails being thrown at him by masked men who were outside screaming blue murder against him.
And who were those people?
Well, we found out later that these masked people had been paid $5,000. They wouldn't say who paid them, but they were paid money to try to burn his house down regardless of whether he was there or not.
And you still to this day don't know who paid them that money to do that?
There are suspicions, but we can't say that out loud. Because there's no factual context connection.
Mm-hmm.
The people who did the firebombing would not give up who paid them the money.
Am I going to get sued if I say that he had a pretty terrible relationship with his next door neighbors?
Well, yeah, he had a bad relationship with his neighbor. And it started out in 2005 over a chicken.
Excuse me?
Over a chicken. Free-range chickens from the neighbor were coming over, and Mr. Thomson was complaining about it. The neighbor said, well, they're free-range chickens. They can go where they want. So Mr. Thomson said, well, in that case, then, I think I'll have one. And so he shot one of the chickens, apparently with a pellet gun. It tasted pretty good. And the neighbor was sort of mad. Mr. Thomson said, well, if you're that mad, look, I'll buy you a dozen chickens to replace that one. Don't worry about it. And things never were very well ever since.
Again, am I going to get sued if I suggest that there was... I might get sued. Maybe I better not.
Don't do that.
Okay, I'm just leaving it alone.
Not by me, but by somebody else.
No, I hear you. Okay, moving right along. So the night in question, people are firebombing his house. His own dog gets torched, right? His dog gets burned.
That's right.
And so Mr. Thomson, as he says it, goes to his safe, gets his gun, fires 3 warning shots, doesn't hit anybody. Where does he shoot?
He shoots 1 shot in the ground, 2 shots at the tree, and he's using his registered handgun. He's a former firearms instructor. And so he's doing this cautiously, knowing what he's doing.
What kind of gun?
It was a 5-shot Smith & Wesson revolver.
So not a 30-round
oh, heavens no. He couldn't have that. No, no, no.
Bushmaster. No, this is a pretty...
It's a very common gun for a hobbyist shooter to have.
Okay. The police arrive, and rather than going after the firebombers, they went after him. What did they charge him with? They
charged him initially with point firearm and weapons dangerous. And he went to court, and I said, well, that just sounds like it's not going to come of anything. And so he went back a couple months later on second appearance, and new charges had been laid for unsafe storage of firearms.
The suggestion was that he actually had the gun in his bedside or something like that as opposed to in a safe.
That's correct. That's what the speculation was of the Crown Attorney.
But you guys proved that wasn't the case.
That's correct. By using the video that was the actual surveillance video, the judge believed Mr. Thomson's honest account, which was that he was woken in bed and that he had to go get the key where he had it secreted, go down the hall into another room, open the safe, get the gun out, and he used the gun and the ammunition from the safe. What the Crown was trying to say, but you also had some ammunition in the bedside table. We want you to be a criminal because of that. And they said you should be a criminal because the ammunition in your bedside table was 1, accessible to you. Well, that's not the law, and the judge recognized that. And number 2, that the ammunition in the bedside table could be made easily accessible to the guns, and the judge said no, it can't, because of the deliberate steps that Mr. Thomson had to take to get out, get his key, go down the hall, go into another room, open his safe, and get at his guns.
Bottom line, judge acquitted him.
Exactly.
Do cases like this normally go to trial?
No, very few go to trial. Most of them get withdrawn at some stage along the line. I've represented quite a number of people who face this with home invasions. Some have had to discharge a gun. Some have just brandished a gun to hold somebody at bay. Typically, it's some kind of a person who's come in who's on drugs or drunk. That's the typical thing.
So why did this go to trial?
Well, I think it went to trial you know, I can only understand what the public gives me. I can't understand what the Crown's motivation is, but it seems to me that the public was feeling very much that if Mr. Thomson could be made a criminal for quickly accessing his guns, very quickly, in a minute, while this firebombing was going on, while 7 Molotov cocktails hit his back door, hit his front door, came through his window, set his dogs on fire, that he needed to be able to protect himself. And I think that they were all feeling a big chill about, you know, going and getting their guns. Even Mr. Thomson has said that he knew that when he got his guns and did this, he expected to be charged.
And yet he did it anyway.
He had no choice.
Thought the situation was that grave.
It was grave. He's got 3 guys outside screaming at him, throwing these firebombs at him. He doesn't know who they are. They're wearing masks. And he tried dialing 911 twice before he went to the guns, but he couldn't get his phone to work. His hands were shaking, and it was escalating. So he had to go do that. And then after that, he called 911, went back to his bedroom, he called 911. The police arrived 10 minutes later.
Okay, that's the background. And I gather in your view, you believe that this case has brought some attention to what you believe are some inadequacies in our gun laws in the country, such as?
Well, number one, the owner of the gun, this is my personal opinion with respect to inadequacies, the owner of the gun really should never have to be concerned with the safety of the gun, because in order to have a gun legally, you have to be trained in the safety of the gun. And therefore, why should I be made a criminal if I have my gun out in the privacy of my home where only I can get it? There's no real danger there. I'm the person, I'm in control, my house is locked, that's good. But the law seeks to make that, would make me a criminal in that situation.
Just so I understand, you're saying as long as the gun is locked away in a safe or in an area where it is secure, bullets presumably not in it.
Oh, it can't have a loaded gun.
Right.
Presently, no.
So then that ought to be fine.
No, I'm saying it's got to go different than that. In other words, if I come home, when I'm home, my gun should not have to be locked up. I mean, it should be accessible to me.
What does that mean, accessible?
Accessible would mean that I should not be barred from getting to my gun.
No, of course. But are you saying that if somebody's in the house, they ought to be able to have a loaded gun in the night table beside?
I didn't say loaded. I didn't say loaded.
Okay, not loaded.
Okay, you can say unloaded because a loaded gun is a different aspect than an unloaded gun. Okay. But to be able to have your gun ready if you need it, given the situation, and that's within the ideas of force equals force, not overdoing things. In other words, if somebody comes into your house and by accident, well, help them get out.
But just so I'm clear, an unloaded gun in the night table beside your bed, if you're in that bed in your home, that should be okay in your view.
It is, but right now that would make you a criminal.
So right now that's not allowed.
That's correct.
But you think it should be allowed?
I think it would be a good idea too, because if you need that gun, and it's a rare circumstance when that's needed, the only reason you're going to reach for that is because you know the police aren't going to be able to help you in time. Can
bullets be in that same night table?
I think so. I would say that my opinion is that they should be able to be there, because it's still going to be a deliberate move to take the ammunition and put it in the gun. Now, I'm talking about people who are licensed. I'm not talking in the context of children in the house. I'm not talking in the context of people who are not licensed in the house.
I hear you, but you know, and I'll put this forward, playing devil's advocate here. I don't have the statistics handy, but I'm reasonably sure that the number of people who harm themselves because they don't know how to handle a gun, and it's that example you just gave of some kid, you know, snooping through mom and dad's drawers, finding the gun, finding the bullets, putting them together, and tragedy happens. That happens far more frequently than what you just described as the admittedly rare occurrence where you're actually going to need that to protect yourself. That's the case in the States. I know that's true.
Well, you're right in the States, but because in Canada we start out that you don't have that gun unless you have it in storage, our statistics are greatly less than the U.S. You have to take a deliberate move. But I think that there are some circumstances where that may make sense, because I'll tell you, most people who are licensed and who are trained have a great respect for their firearm, and they don't want to create an issue of non-safety. In other words, they will lock up their gun unless they think that there's a circumstance when when they're in danger, or there might be a danger, because otherwise, quite frankly, they value it. They don't want it stolen. They don't want somebody to be hurt with it. That's ingrained in the safety culture. That's one of the things people don't fully understand, is that there's a gangster culture. I don't represent those people. I stay away from those people. I'm in a safety culture. Our culture starts with strict training. And if any person within the gun culture, the licensed gun culture, breaches the safety issues, they're told or they're ostracized.
Okay, but
no tolerance.
Let me, in our last few minutes here, and I want to tread delicately on this because obviously there is no correlation between what happened in Connecticut and your client's situation. However, in the United States, where, as we know, they're gun crazy, I shouldn't have put it that way, but you know what I mean. They appear to be in the midst of a serious debate in which there will be significant attempts made at more gun control. You are now coming here to this program today to tell us that you think there should actually be a loosening of the restrictions on gun ownership in the country, or at least in the way guns are stored or handled.
Yes.
And I wonder if you're worried about that juxtaposition.
No, I'm not, because there's a fundamental difference between Canada and the United States. We have licensing. In the U.S., they have the Second Amendment. We don't have that. And because we have to have the licensing, we have to have the training to get the licensing, that makes a tremendous difference. What I will say about Connecticut is I did look at the Connecticut laws, and I found that their laws are very close to the Canadian laws in that state. Every state differs. And if, in fact, what's significant there is if the police learn that a person may be a threat to themselves or others, they can come in and take the guns. That's exactly like Canadian law. So we can only wonder why that wasn't done in that situation.
It's one of the crazy tragedies of that whole story is that they actually have tough gun control laws in Connecticut, and yet that happened anyway.
That's the problem. When you have someone who is intent on mayhem, they're going to ignore all paper laws. And that's where the citizens have to be able to take positive action to protect themselves, their families, their community.
I'm just looking at your tie, and I think I'm noticing for the first... What is that design on your tie?
These are shotgun shells.
That's what I thought they were, yeah.
Yeah, I got this in England at a shop called Holland & Holland. They make fine shotguns.
Huh. At the end of the day, do you think having a gun in this country makes you safer?
That's a yes and a no. Because as a gun owner, we're always worried that somebody may try to come in on us. We don't like to have our names published, our addresses published. Is it a matter of safety? People presently are not buying guns in Canada for safety purposes. They're buying them for sport shooting purposes and for hunting purposes, because that's what's allowed under our licensing. I see no reason presently to change that.
Okay. Ed Burlew, it's good of you to come into TVO tonight and share your views with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.